In this video, I'll be talking about what we found during our research to do with the names and words we got at Anne of Cleves' house. So the first thing we looked into was the Navy side of things. And we started looking at the name George because we got that to do with the Navy. Or so we thought. We're not 100% sure on that one anymore. However, I mentioned that the names and stuff to my mum, and she said that she thought there was a ship called the Jasper. So upon further investigation, we found out that there were not just one, not two, but 3 ships called the Jasper. Now, they were all HMS Jaspers. One of them ran aground, one of them sank, and one of them was sold. I don't know which, I can't remember the order. I know the third one was the one that was sold, but I can't remember the order of the other 2. Now, there's no record of why the first one sank, according to Wikipedia. However, upon further investigation, my boyfriend found out that the crew said that they discovered a fire between the stove and the wall, and they tried to put it out to no avail. So they left the ship and waited for the smoke and fire to die down. When it did die down, they started heading back to the ship, upon which time the ship exploded. Now, this ship was a gunship, and it was carrying powder, and that's the reason why it exploded. Now, there was a Lieutenant Crawley, who my boyfriend looked into, but there's no record of what happened to him. My boyfriend thinks that it's possible that he died at sea and was swept overboard during a storm or something. Because he did look into the name, and unfortunately it was a dead end. However, he has got in touch with a couple of Navy record offices and maritime museums to try and get records of the cargo and the cruise names and things like that. So, upon which time, if and when we get any information to do with that side of things, I will post an update on here. The next thing we looked into was the avalanche that happened in Lewes. Now, during the avalanche, 8 people were killed and several people were rescued, but a lot of them then subsequently died from hypothermia. One of the survivors was a little girl called Fanny. At the moment, we have no idea what happened to her, whether she died from hypothermia or whether she went on to live to be an old lady or whatever. However, her dress is on display at Anne of Cleves' house, so it's possible that if she died of hypothermia, that she's the little girl that was there during the time that came across and said, "The little girl likes you." However, there was also a little girl of 11 years old who was killed during the avalanche, so it's possibly her as well. Now, we looked into a bunch of the names from the list, so we got like Blanche, Richard, George, all of those kind of names. And my boyfriend looked into them in terms of graveyards and things like that. We couldn't find anything online. However, I am going to go to the local records office / records keep to see if I can find any more information about births, deaths, marriages around the time of dates we got. I'm also going to look into ordnance surveys of Lewes, because apparently Anne of Cleves' house used to be a lodge back in the day when Lewes was a port town. I'm also going to try and look into any cold cases or suspicious cases or murders around that time as well, if I can. That one might be a bit harder to do, but with the fact that I'm also an author or aspiring author, I can possibly use my research in my books as well for inspiration, so I can possibly do it that way. Now, the next thing I'm going to say is I looked back at one of the previous videos from their previous investigation at Anne of Cleves' house that Pigs did, and I found out that there was a woman that hung herself in the bedroom. because someone felt that somebody hung themselves or was killed in that room, and they said that they later found out that somebody had, but they didn't have a name or a date or anything like that for when she did. So, because of what we got on the Spirit Talker, saying he killed us and she was hung, we think that maybe she didn't hang herself, but she was hung by somebody and it was made to look like she did it to herself. Or somebody else did it, or maybe the demonic entity was already around at the time when she killed herself. And maybe she was possessed by this demonic entity and it made her kill herself. There's a few options into do with that. Now, I also looked into battles in Lewes because we got battle here on the Spirit Talker. And I found out that there was a battle in Lewes back in 1246, which is known as the Battle of Lewes or the Battle of the Barons. Now, that was between King Henry III and Simon de Montfort. Now, King Henry's second in command, or one of them at least, was a guy named Richard of Cornwall. So, now, remember that Richard was one of the names that we had from the Spirit Board and from the Franks box. Now, I looked a bit more into Richard of Cornwall, and it turns out that his mother was called Isabella, which was a name that we had on the Spirit Talker. I also looked at his illegitimate children, because he had a couple of children from marriages and a lot of illegitimate children. Now, one of his illegitimate daughters was called Joan, which was another name that we had on the list of names that we got on the Spirit Talker. I also decided to look a bit more into Simon de Montfort as well, and found out that he was offered the chance to become the King of France after the Queen Dowager Blanche passed away. Now, if you remember, Blanche was also one of the names that we got as well. So we think that this is a very, very strong lead to some of the names and links that we got at Anne of Cleves' house. So my boyfriend was looking into some of the grave names as well. And he found someone called Samuel Medhurst, who died at the age of 88. Now, Samuel had a son who was also called Samuel, who died at 9 months. He had a lot of other children as well, who also died quite young. Samuel was the first child, having died at 9 months. The second child died at 10 months. The third child died at 3 years, 8 months. The fourth child died at 6 months. The fifth child died at 8 months. The sixth child died at 36 years old. The seventh child died at 37 years old. The eighth child died at 21 years old. And the ninth child died at 18 months. So he's going to look more into the names to see if he can find any of the other names of the children, because I don't think he could find any other names of the children at the time. So we're going to look more into the names of Simon's children and see if we can find any other names that match the ones that we have from the names that we got at Anne of Cleves, to see if there's any other names that correlate with what we had. Now, we also found out that Joan, so Richard's illegitimate daughter, had a son who was a captain and admiral in the King's Royal Navy. He was called Henry. We didn't get the name Henry, but we'll see what we get in the future. As I said, I'm going to look more into this, as is my boyfriend, and see what else we can find. I'll post in another video as a part 2 for this one, whatever else we do find. But whatever happens, I will catch you guys next time, either in the next part of this video or in the next location, depending on which one comes first. And I am planning on going back to Anne of Cleves' house a few more times during investigations. I'm looking at getting myself booked in to go on the 12th of October this year, but I'm also looking at booking myself in to go again next year if they do one next year at Anna Cleves, and that one will be with my boyfriend again, so we can try and see if we can get anything else each time we go to these locations, because the more times you visit a location that's haunted, the more information you can get from those locations, the more correlations you might find, etc., etc. So as I said, I will catch you either in the next part of this video series or in the next location, which I will be going to in September.